Just outside the medieval town of Athenry lies an oasis of heritage and folk culture. Ladieswell draws visitors from far and near, and on a warm summer's day, I'm joined by archaeologist Dr Christy Cunniffe to take a walking tour and discover a little bit more about the popular site. Its origins and the legends of an apparition by Our Lady in 1249 link back to the medieval history of Athenry, as Dr Cunniffe begins to explain.
The legend, in fact, is a legend of a soldier who was wounded at the Battle of Athenry, came out here, and there was an apparition took place here on the 15th of August 1249, where the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to this soldier and he was cured. So what we're getting here is we're getting a hint in many ways that there was possibly a well here prior to that, and that this man arrived out here. But there's also a bigger story to that as well. You know, you have to look at wells and the history of wells and the folk tradition around wells and that in a much broader sense. It's not all historically correct. A lot of it is in the belief of the people, no more than in the cures and that this was associated with wells. But one of the things we're told is that the Anglo-Norman settlers who were in Athenry wanted, if you like, not to fight on the 15th of August.
Now, there was a particular reason for that, because it was a feast day for them.
It was the feast day for them. They were all Catholics, all Christians at that stage, both the Gaelic Irish and the Anglo-Normans. But according to the telling of the story, the Anglo-Normans were definitely more devout on the day. They asked for a ceasefire, if you like, for that particular day, but the Gaelic chieftains decided, no, we're going to fight. And, you know, this is a consequence of that, if you like, that they lost the battle. The Gaelic Irish lost big time at this battle. And this is the sort of the folk belief. But that's common with holy wells, that you get these folk traditions and these stories that build up around them. You know, it's part, if you like, of the culture of the well. You know, anything that was this important, we'll say Ladies' Well here in Athenry was hugely important. People from as far west as Connemara came here on the Patron Day. You know, it was just so important. They came from all over East Galway and other places. Some of the folklore would suggest that there were thousands of people here at the gathering here. And in fact, some of the folk tradition would say that they visited the well for 9 consecutive days, or that there was a patron here for 9 consecutive days prior to the 15th of August. So big were some of them. Generally, they lasted for about 2 or 3 days. And you could have all sorts of things happening around the feast day or the patron day. For example, it would start off, obviously, with the rounds, or as we call it in Irish, the turris. So even looking at the well here today and looking at some of the modern manifestations, if you like, at the well, there was a lot of work done here in the latter 20th century, and probably some work done here in the 21st century. But even when we walk around this site, which we will do in a few minutes, we'll visit certain locations here, and they'd be referred to as stations. At more traditional wells, and when I use the word more traditional, I mean wells that haven't been maybe modified in the latter period. Wells that are still maybe little wells in fields with very little around them. Yet when you examine them, you find that there's probably either a whitethorn bush or more likely an ash tree associated with the well. That's very important. The ash tree, and in fact here at Ladies' Well, there's an ash tree growing beside the well. So the ash tree was very potent. The ash was a symbol of fertility. It was a symbol of well-being. So it was one of the major important trees of the Celtic peoples and of the early Irish people.
So here we are, Christy. When we come in the gate from the car park, this is the first site that we arrive at here at Ladies' Well, and it's this really important statue. Can you tell me the background to this? First
of all, the statue was carved by Ken Thompson, and it's a very, very powerful piece. What it actually shows us, the kneeling soldier or knight in front of the Virgin Mary, or Our Lady. And if we examine it closely, we can actually see that the hair itself is done in a particular style. It's actually quite Celtic in the way it's done. You can see those little scrolls in the hair and the ringlets in the hair, the way it hangs down the side and that. It's quite stylised, very stylised, but it's a wonderful piece. It's in Kilkenny limestone. And if you look at a few things, first of all, the soldier himself, he's there, he's looking up at the Virgin Mary. She has her hands on her shoulder. He has his hands literally on her hips. I suppose he's in adoration. She's healing him. You know, there is a sense of healing there. On one side, you can actually see the bag or the satchel that he's carrying. But on the other side, if we walk around ever so slowly, we'll actually see that there's a scabbard for a sword. But if you notice, there's actually no sword. So in a way, there's a lot more going on here. You know, this man is without, you know, if you like, the conflict is taken out of this in every sense. So the artist is doing a lot more in this instance than just trying to portray the story. So it's a wonderful piece, a wonderful centrepiece here, and that went in for the millennium. So this is part of this little Millennium Park here, and it's set right in the centre of the circle. And if we examine it, we actually see that there are, there's a cross here. There are 4 different entrances or exits out of here, and the place is very well laid out. As a Millennium Garden here. Wonderful colour here behind us, and even as it is, you can hear the birds and that in the background, which is wonderful again. You know, to be able to pick up that sense of the natural setting.
Like, it's really beautiful. It's hard to describe how beautiful it is, but even the flowering, I suppose we're lucky we're here midsummer as well, and we've got a great day for it, but the colour in the surroundings, and there's a number of benches as well. It seems to be a real area for reflection.
Well, that's the thing. I came here a little earlier, and I met a lady on her way into work. She told me that she works in the local nursing home. She's from out in Monavea, and I just, being nosy as I am, I asked her where she was from, because it's nice to know, especially when you're looking at sites like these, where do people come from? But she said before she goes into work, she usually comes down here and when she came down, she actually did the Stations of the Cross. So there again, you actually see somebody that, she came here for that little bit of calmness and solitude before she actually went into probably a hectic afternoon's work.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. There's definitely a sense of that here. So we follow the path down along, and we're going to go down one of the exits here and into the next area of the site. And more beautiful colour as well meets you when you're on the way down here.
Absolutely, and what you're doing is you're walking through literally this garden in the form of a cross, but then you're crossing a stream, which is also interesting, because the fact that this well is right beside the stream here is very important, because here you have, if you like, nature at its best, water, flowing water, and flowing water, you know, the whole notion of water, wells, etc. That's really part of the big story. And even as we're going through here, there's almost a rush of the wind out, like we're after going under an arch of ash trees here, and you can actually feel the wind blowing out of here. And the very first thing that we see when we enter here is the Marian Grotto. And we mightn't follow it in chronological order, we'll follow it in the order that has laid out.
Yes, that's
so what we're looking at here is a representation of the apparition at Lourdes. So we see Our Lady up in the grotto, if you like, up in the cave, up on the side of the hillside. And down here, kneeling in the flowers here, we actually see St. Bernadette. And this is typical. You see the blues, Our Lady in blue and white with the rosary. And Bernadette here then, she's nearly always shown in the darker colours, because, you know, this is how we depict scenes like these. She's just an ordinary girl, so she's depicted in brown, but she has the blue bonnet here, the blue cape here, similar to Our Lady. And then, of course, inside in the little cave here that was created within this grotto, we have a shrine here with all the candles and all the different elements of devotion here. So people come here, they light their candles and they say their few prayers. And they move on, you know, they move around from one station to the other. So this really is, within the complex here, probably the first major station.
And even though it's a stone monument, it doesn't seem apart from the landscape, Christy, if that makes sense. It just seems all well to sit in naturally together. That's
right, and I think that's down to the fact that it's here so long. This was erected in 1954 for the Marian year. So it has naturalised, the lichens have grown, the mosses have grown on the stones and that. And even the way this is built, it's built in a lovely dry stone. You know, everything is sort of semi-natural. It's whoever built it at the time understood what they were meant to depict.
And as we move to the next site, Christy, you were telling me 1954 was a very important year. Well, I know it was the year you were born, you told me. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that.
Yeah, well, it was. It was
But
the year
also
before.
in the Marian heritage, it was an extremely important year.
Yeah, well, 1954 was regarded as one of the major Marian years. And as you drive through Ireland, you'll see shrines, wayside shrines, you'll see grottos like that, you'll see statues lit up on the edges of towns. And when you go out and examine them, you'll find that 54 is one of the strong Marian years. So it really was set aside as the Marian year. Now, there was a number of others, it recurs, but that was really one of the more powerful Marian years. As we walk through, you even see here there's an altar. And this is one of the things, this is an element that was brought into the devotion here at the Holy Well, was the saying of Mass here. For the 15th of August. That didn't always happen at wells or shrines. These are more, I suppose, celebrations of the people. And when we think about the altar here, in many ways this is the formalisation in the 20th century of what would have been a much looser and maybe a much less Catholic sort of celebration.
From what I read, it seemed that the Catholic Church kind of became involved at a certain point and then drove it on forward. But before that, it was a much less formalised occasion.
It was less formalised, and there was a lot of other things occurring. What you got at a lot of these sites is you got the devotional part first. So when people would go over there 2 or 3 days on their patron, they would arrive to the site and the prayers would be said and the terraces would be undertaken. The long station in Clonmacnoise could take 4 or 5 hours to do. I actually did it with some of the older people down around that area, but they're not much older than myself. But they were, if you like, they were the people that was carrying on the tradition. And when they did that, I was surprised. We were actually recording it. It was being televised, and I was surprised with the number of circuits, the number of stations that were around the Holy Well, St. Kieran's Well, first of all. They went around so many times. At each stop, they say certain prayers. They will circuit the well clockwise. They will also circuit each of the stations clockwise. They will recite particular prayers at each one of those stations, and then they will take water. And they will either drink the water or bless themselves with the water. This will carry on, and this will be repeated on several occasions. Eventually they leave that, and then they'll move on so far, and they'll come to a bush somewhere, and there'll be more prayers said, they'll stop. And this goes on and on and on, and you circuit every significant space in, if you like, that ritual landscape before you finish. And and the same thing would have happened here when the people came here. I can't quite remember how many times the circuited the well here, but I know there was maybe 14 or 15 times. But people would have had these prayers that they would have known. They would have also carried pebbles here, a certain amount of pebbles in their hands, and those pebbles would be dropped either into the well or dropped at a particular point. They're prayer stones. They're votive offerings. They're serving all sorts of things. So if they were saying a prayer for somebody that was ill at home or that little white stone, if it was a white stone. And this is one of the things I often have encountered at Holy Wells. You visit Holy Wells out in the landscape, and the first thing you'd think is, it's very little here. And then you begin to look and you see, well, actually I can see the dish in the ground. The water is gone. Okay, the water is gone, but that really doesn't matter. The well has sort of got bogged over by cattle and things and time and that. Then you begin to look and you see the tree is there. The old ash tree, the stump of the ash tree might be all that's left. And then maybe you'll be lucky enough that you'll see maybe where somebody is still visiting the tree, and you will actually see maybe a cloth or something tied to it. So the cloths were being used. In the north of Ireland and in Scotland, they refer to them as clouties. And these were part of the votive offering. If you had an illness, whatever you suffer from, you took a cloth from that part of the body and you left it. And that was, if you like, leaving your illness behind. And this was very, very traditional. Or you might find that there's a little hump or bump right beside the well. And if you were fortunate enough that the cattle had actually decided that, you might see that there were small quartz pebbles in it. These are the little cairns of stones that the people created. And while we're talking here, we might just have picked up on one peal of the bell in the town. We're that close to the town of Athenry here at Ladies Well. that you can actually hear the bells of the town. And you can imagine back when the bells were ringing out in the Dominican Abbey, and when the bells are ringing out here in St. Mary's, in the parish church here in Athenry, they pealing and people out here, visiting the well, back in the 13th and 14th and 15th, the medieval period. So some of this stuff is continuity. What we're hearing here, with the exception of the modern traffic, is what people saw or heard here, walking across the water, seeing the water flowing here was something that medieval pilgrims saw and enjoyed as well. And you can just imagine people coming here, to tell us that people came here to this well the day before. You can imagine people coming here in donkey and carts, not really set up, not the sort of people that were going to stay in a hotel overnight, probably set up a little tent somewhere. You can imagine the hucksters, as we'd call them nowadays here, all part of the story that would have, of Holy Wells, where you'd have the guys selling the bits and pieces. You'd have the whiskey stalls, which were very important, and the drink stalls. You have a place where they could get a bit to eat, as they say themselves. A lovely story is the story of Tubberporrick over near Monavea. Wonderful story there, wonderful holy well there as well. And in that instance, there was after the patron, of course, they had all removed themselves to the whiskey tents, and one man refused to pay for his meat, because it was meat we know he got, and a bit of a tussle took place, and the poor man that was serving the dinner ended up killed on the spot. And there was a cairn of stones over there marking the spot where this man was killed at the patron. And the priest at that stage then banished it. He stopped the patron. And this is what happened in the 19th century. A lot of patrons were stopped simply because there was some terrible debauchery going on. There was marriages being made, or marriages of a type. There was drinking. There was all sorts of stuff that shouldn't be happening at a holy site taking place.
Public order, I think we'd call it now.
Very much public order, and all sorts of debauchery. It was quite primitive what went on. But then you have to think about the origin of some of these. These were the great feasts of what we could loosely call Celtic Ireland, of ancient Ireland, where people gathered at these old sites, the sites where the billet tree was, where the sacred tree was. Not a Christian tree at all, a sacred billet tree, possibly a big ash tree, or maybe a big oak tree, or maybe a big yew tree. Some of these big, powerful trees that the people believed in. Sites where there was water, sites where the well was near the tree, and people are gathering there. Well, that's a major festival for the people. So all sorts of things are going to happen there anyway. It was about framing up relationships. It was about creating relationships. It was about marriage. All sorts of things that we take for granted today. But, it was a way that society actually... and it was also, when you look at the feast days, this particular feast day, the 15th of August, dedicated to Our Lady, well, you're really looking at something that's the tail end of Lunasa. The old Lunasa festival was a very important festival. We're facing into the autumn, and time is going to change. The light is going to change. There's all of these different things. The same as St. Bridget's Day in Bulk. A very important day. The first day of spring officially. Everything is growing again. Everything is about to grow. Everything is, you have this wonderful notion of fertility. And this is what they were about. These pagan sites, what they called them that, these pre-Christian sites, were about fertility. They were about celebrating the year. They were about celebrating what people needed. That is spirituality, that people can actually engage with the landscape. They can actually engage with, like, the sounds that we hear, the trees, the rustling in the trees and that. That primeval sound that you get from wind and leaves. That's an amazing sound. And that's, this is why these sites work. The birds are there, you can hear the swallows there. Those swallows will be gone in a short while, they'll be heading off again. But they're here for now, and there's butterflies flitting around the place. There's all sorts of things in here in this little oasis. They're celebrating it as much as we are. But the people that, if you like, initiated these sites, they came to them because these places were special. There were special places in the landscape where they actually felt this. what you will observe at these sites, though, is that everybody will come to see sites like these, whereas people that might regard themselves as less devout in a traditional sense feel very free as a site like this, because there's something very natural about it. You don't have to. It's just a natural thing to do, you know.
Yeah, there's a sense of connection.
A sense of connection. You know what we're actually doing here. We're following a sort of a tourist. We're literally on pilgrimage here as we're doing this, and this is what this is about. These are local pilgrim sites, local pilgrimage, and pilgrimage was huge throughout the world, and every religious tradition follows some form of belief in water, nature, and the trees. They might have modified this through their own particular deities that they add to them, but this is a wonderful, wonderful site here, and we're standing right beside the well here, and this is Lady's Well. You can see it's quite modified.
And there's still water in
Still
here.
water in it, and that's a wonderful thing. And of course, we're lucky because in a lot of cases, water tables have been modified, and you know, whereas in the past, the water might be quite close to the top of some of these little shallow wells. We're lucky here that the stream is still running and that the well is over here, you know, quite close to it. So there's probably quite a high water table. I don't know if it goes dry. I've never been here when it was dry. But what we see here is we see this lovely little enclosure, and in a way this is reflecting the earlier well houses. In a lot of instances what you found is a well, and then outside of that you got what you could call the well house. In other words, another enclosure outside of it. And this is exactly what we have here. But what we also see when we look at this well, and I'm just examining the tree. Do you see the wonderful ash tree? That ash tree is here for quite a while. Now, it's not here since the 14th or 15th, since the medieval period. You know what I mean? It's not that old, but it's still quite a mature ash tree. And we can see actually part of it has broken away. And I just saw your finger going up. You've just spotted something. That's what I was looking for.
Is that a piece of cloth that somebody has tied on?
That's it. So I was actually scanning it there while we were talking, and I was saying, oh, Ginny, it's a pity. But no, there you are. That's a cloth tied to the ash tree there. Actually, there's two pieces tied there. And that's somebody's worry or somebody's illness tied to the tree. Mm-hmm. So to come here, to take the water, today it's more professional, there's a pump beside it. In the past, people would go down into the well. There was generally a cup or some sort of a vessel left beside these wells where you could actually take the water, and people would drink the waters. And it's very possible that there was an actual medicinal quality in those waters. You know, you might be getting sulphur water, you might be getting a particular water with a particular, you know, whatever was in it, that might be good for something.
Like a mineral balance.
A mineral balance, yeah. Absolutely.
Now, I do see they've noticed up here water in the well is not suitable for drinking now, but I would assume that people, maybe if they have particular ailments, whether it be skin related or anything, they would use the water and place it on the area or tie the piece of cloth onto the ashtray.
Well, that's at home where I come from in Clonfert. We have an old horse chestnut tree of all things, which sort of contradicts a lot of what we say. The horse chestnut is a foreign tree. It was brought in as an import from England. Which, yes, it has become, if you like, the host to a little holy well in Clonfert, a well dedicated to St. Brendan. But it's the third of those wells. That's what's interesting. And in that particular case, what people would do is they would stick their finger into the well. Initially, you could get your finger in or your hand in through this little hole in the side of the tree. You get some water in it that was collecting in the tree. Take it out, and it was for wort. So you'd apply it to the wort, and you'd make 3 visits. And often with wells, there's this notion of 3 visits, that you make 3 visits to the well. You take the water, whether it's a well that you drink the waters at, or it's a well that you actually apply the waters at. But you must make 3 visits.
Does that go back to the Trinity, Christy?
Well, I think it goes back probably to and even an earlier Trinity, I would imagine. I think that sort of notion goes right back in time, you know, but definitely as part of the Trinity. It has been regarded in that sense, you know, that everything is done in trees. But, you know, if you think about it, in most traditions, we have these sacred numbers. Christianity, 3 is a very powerful one. The Trinity, 7, probably the most significant, 12. 10, so you begin very quickly to say, well, there's an awful lot of sacred numbers, but there are an awful lot of sacred things. But, and we can actually work on that. That's actually one of the things I'm interested in, is the use of these sort of sacred numbers, that you can make certain sense of it. But I think you're going right back to the notion of the pagan deities as well, where, again, going back, and the Trinity was, we think about the shamrock and this story of the shamrock being used by St. Patrick and that to the pagans, and try to explain about it. He didn't need to do that. He just needed to say, we're just changing his name. We can't pronounce the name of your guy, but this is our man is God. And, it's just the same thing, because they believed in we look at some of the Janus heads, the Janus figures, where you have 3 faces. So over 2,000 years ago, fully understood the Trinity, but not maybe in the Christian sense. But it was no shock to the system.
It's funny, as you speak about 3, I've spotted another piece of cloth tied into the tree here on the right-hand side of the well, which is well hidden. So we have at least 3. But to think that people are still continuing that tradition. Yes. I mean, when we were speaking about it earlier, it sounded like something people used to do. That continues on to this day.
No, it continues on. There are still people who visit holy wells today. The people that actually tie these here are following a tradition. And a tradition that they believed in. But the tradition can evolve as well. And we have to be prepared for that. There can be certain evolution. The well I talked about in Clonfert, for example, that started out as a well in the ground where pilgrims visited. According to the folk tradition, the folklore, a dog drowned in the well. That's a desecration of the well. By the dog either being drowned in it, intentionally by somebody, or falling into the well and drowning, he has desecrated that well. The well moved, and it moved up into a bough of a big ash tree. 2 young fellas climbed the tree, and one of them piddled into the bole of the tree. The well was desecrated. It falls in the storm after, and then it's found where it is today in Clonfert, in the side of that horse chestnut. So the well has moved itself, naturally moved itself, in the belief system of the people. Somebody found this strange-looking opening in a side of a tree that resembled the doorway of the cathedral in Clonfert, and they use that today as the holy well. And if the belief system continues, when that well eventually, and people have been driving quines into it and doing all sorts of stuff to the tree that the tree doesn't really want, eventually they'll kill the tree. This happened in Clonena, where the tree eventually just fell over from all the copper that was being hammered into it. But if the belief continues, that'll all manifest itself in some other site nearby. Maybe another tree will spring up out of it. And this is one of the things. You take this ash tree. If we look back at that original big ash tree, you can actually see that half it fell away at some stage. But this piece clings on. And in the belief of the people, it'll grow, it'll come back. And, I'm sure if we could talk to some of the old-timers here in Athenry, they'll tell you that tree was always there, that had fell in the great wind or something like that. That'll be traditions that we're not aware of around
It's almost like the well is part of its roots here, the way it's all situated together.
And that's what happens. They wrap themselves around it. Like it's completely encompassing the well, but one goes with the other. There's a wonderful well over in Leamonaghan in County Offaly linked to St. Monchan. And in that instance, the same thing happens. There's very little of the ash tree left, which have this big butt of a tree growing with modern branches on it. And the people around that area believe if you take a branch of the tree, put in your house will never burn. So there's all these traditions. There could be traditions here that I'm not aware of. I'm looking at this from an archaeological and, I suppose, from a cultural perspective. And in here as well, with one other element, this particular statue. It's a lovely statue of the Virgin Mary. And this was erected here for the Marian year 1988. So here we have another Marian year. And the local parish priest here at the time, actually in consultation with Monsignor Horn, brought this statue here from Knock. So here you have the linking of 2 Marian shrines by virtue of the statue.
And it's like she overlooks and protects the well the way it's situated here.
Yeah, and when you think about it, she's the most modern element here, but it's a wonderful statue as well, and a totally different image of the Virgin Mary. She looks more like a native Irish woman, her bare feet, but when you look at that cloak there, it looks almost like a woman from the Claddagh in Galway almost, you're getting that sort of appearance.
And again, something I've seen at a couple of the sites we've visited is the presence of the rosary beads. I mean, a set hangs there from the top of the well. People have left rosary beads there as well around the statue's neck. People like to leave a sense of something when they're going from these sites.
Well, you often find holy medals and rosary beads and that left at sites like these. And again, that's part of the votive offering. And all over the world, people leave these votive offerings. They're an offering to the gods, they're an offering to the Virgin Mary in this case. They can also be partially that thing of leaving the illness.
I did spot a pair of reading glasses left in there, but am I reading too much into that? Did somebody leave those? Or
It's very likely that somebody left them. Wow. Somebody could have lost them, but very likely somebody left them. Wow. Somebody that's came here for a cure, maybe for sore eyes or some sort, maybe cataracts or some complaint, as they say, that they had. And on the outside here, we have something else, totally different. I'm just going to remove, that's actually lighting, that's a lovely little lantern there with a night light in it. But I'll remove it for a second and I'll put it back because I want you to see this. You're looking here at a 14th century effigy of the Virgin Mary with Christ in her arms, with the dead Christ. So you're looking at, but it's executed in a different manner. Normally you find the dead Christ in a different manner. It's usually sort of seated and lying across the lap of the Virgin herself. This is what they call a pieta. So this is an original medieval pieta that came out more than likely from the Dominican friary here in town, because there is in the Lady Chapel, there's one side chapel there that's dedicated to Our Lady, but in that big Lady Chapel there's a whole series of arcades in which there were statues and effigies and that. There's one or two that you can see on the ground today broken. They're just there as slabs. Perhaps this was one of those, or perhaps it was a weeper from a late medieval tomb, as we call it, 14th, 15th century tomb. But it's a wonderful piece, quite damaged.
Yeah, did I read that was during the time of the Cromwellian soldiers? Well,
it's very possible, because also inside in the friary, there's actually another effigy of the Mother and Child, the Madonna and Child, and it's defaced. And that was something that did happen during the Cromwellian period, that that strong puritanical belief came in, and effigies were defaced. It was all part of the destruction of effigies and that. This disbelief, and especially the disbelief in the Virgin Mary as being anything other than just the Mother of Christ. Because from a Catholic perspective, the Virgin Mary is really used as a conduit to Christ. Whereas we'll say in the Reformed churches, she's just regarded as, well, a mother, but a mother of somebody special.
I think as well the fact that we had the Dominican priory here in Athenry, and there's such a Marian devotion here, it was said that lended itself well to the Dominicans themselves.
Absolutely. The Dominicans had a very strong devotion to Our Lady. And it was more than likely the Dominicans that brought the whole cult of the belief in the rosary to Ireland. They promoted the rosary and the use of the rosary beads and that. And if you look at some of the collections, like of Galway City or that, if you look at, you'll find the Galway rosaries and that. These wonderful medieval rosaries, 17th century rosaries and 18th century rosaries, these early rosaries. But a lot of those are associated with the likes of the Dominicans.
The connections continue.
Oh, at all times. And I think that's the great thing. One more item here on our left. These are the big items. And after this then, we're sort of following the last trail of the station here. This particular large crucifix here, this is a Calvary, referred to as a Calvary, and you get the step base, the 3 steps coming up. This big stout cross. I'm looking at it and I think that's a concrete cross. I think I'm correct, yes. And then the huge big corpus or figure of Christ on it, and of course the title on top there, Jesu Nazarene Rex Judaeum, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. But this was erected in 1932 for the Eucharistic Congress. So you can see that the important calendar years, if you like, within the 20th century Catholic Church are being reflected here in different aspects of what took place here, the modification and the adding to this site. So even though it started out as a medieval site, and it does borrow a medieval piece here, and it goes right back and probably goes back to pre-Christianity, the place has been added to other aspects of significance within the Christian calendar, within the Catholic Christian calendar, have been included here. And these were very important, if you like, steps on the way, if you like, for Catholicism right through. We don't see much here from the 19th century. It was a poor century, and, we didn't see this big elaboration of sites at that stage. That was the time when people were coming here doing the old form pilgrimage and, doing the circuits and staying overnight and all of that. But in the 20th century, we start to build and develop and put our own...
Monumentalise a bit more, I suppose.
Monumentalise. And, you can look at that in a few ways. If I was to look as a purist at the well, I'd say there should be nothing else in here. Really should be nothing else. I need the well and the few pieces around it. But we're after walking through something here, and we've been quite excited about it and enjoyed it, and and we can see what it's about. That it is a place where people are coming. The more people that come, the more requirements there are. It's part of the 20th century, and it's now part of the 21st century.
It's a reflection of human nature, really.
It is.
And I think in this environment, they have been very careful to keep everything tastefully done and within the natural environment that it surrounds.
I really think that the natural environment here is what actually contains it and controls it. And, if you like, takes away that monumentalisation of it, if you like. If this was an open site, to be stark, to be a lot of...
Because they're bold pieces, like this crucifixion scene is quite bold.
That's very powerful. It's a wonderful piece, and I love those. I love those big crucifixes. I just think that there was so much put into them, and also not just the work that went into them, but even the people themselves, the cost of this. The people invested in this.
How funny. I just see a child speaker left behind just beside the last site we visited. A sign that people bring their children here too. Absolutely.
That's interesting. That's the other element of it, that children are being brought here. And I wonder how do they see this, and how will they see it in the future? We're at a sort of a cusp in time where there's a lot of change taking place within, if you like, orthodox belief systems. And but maybe these are the sites. Maybe this is, maybe when young people are being taught in school and that, maybe it's not the Orthodox religion that is going to be taught in the same way. It'll be there, but maybe then we need to reinvest in the natural side of what's here as well.
Certainly a lot of school children, I think, end up doing projects on sites like these within their own locality, more so than the history of the local church. It's the history of the local natural sites that have been there for thousands of years.
That's right. That's right, and they can give them. There's so much in here. When you look at, actually, there's contradictions. There's a lot of imported species here, but there's an awful lot, and it's just, what time is it? Half 3. You just heard the bell again. I love bells. That's why I'm infatuated by bells. Now, we're standing beside a rectangular. Well, it's not rectangular. It's square-ish block of stone with a square socket in the centre. That's actually the base of a cross. And we talked earlier about cures. This is known as the headache stone, which is wonderful again, the notion that you can come here. Now, I'm not sure what you do, whether you try to stick your head down in it.
That's what I was about to ask. I, for one, am very interested in this piece now, because how does this supposed cure work?
I don't know. I've seen headache stones. I've seen back stones for curing backache, for neck ache. And in most cases, you actually, for the one that I saw for the neck problems, you had to lie back and put your neck in it. The one with your back, you had to actually sit down into it. It was a large bull-on stone. And merciful God, if you could actually do what was required on the 10, if you like, you didn't have a back. You were cured before you started. But if I'm to stick my head down in that, I don't know how. I just don't know. But maybe at some stage in its history, maybe that was. Water holding. It may have had a different bottom to it, and maybe water got gathered in it, and maybe that was the cure. Or maybe you just said particular prayers here. Or maybe you just did your terrace, you did your circuit around it clockwise, and maybe you recited particular prayers. So there's all sorts of ways that people had of overcoming these things. But that's the base of a large cross here. And Athenry has the most magnificent 15th century cross right in the centre of the town.
The market cross, yeah.
The market cross. It's one of those lantern type crosses quite unique in Ireland.
That looks nothing like a cross, actually.
It looks not like a cross. Now, it was taller than it is, but it's absolutely magnificent. But there are a lot of crosses here in Athenry. There's a shaft of a 17th century cross that most people don't know about. There's this base. There was another base outside the town in the Fair Green outside the town. 4 crosses that we know about in Athenry. Now, one of them is 17th century, but you can take it, if it's 17th century, it's probably a continuation of something that was earlier as well. So these are significant things. So if we had 4 crosses here in Athenry, that's significant as well. Why is this out here? Was it brought out here? Or was this part of the Termon? Was this on the outskirts? Was this always regarded as part of the town of Athenry during the medieval period? Was this part of the extent, if you like, of the Termon area of the parish church here in Athenry? It's hard to know, but, And from here on in, then, it changes. What people actually do then is to follow a modern... Now, I don't know when I'm saying modern in the sense that it's something different to these sites, and something that was added in a lot of cases in the later 20th century, the Stations of the Cross. So as we follow this path here, this little serpentine patch going around here, we see in Roman numerals here, we see little stops on limestone. And that lady that was in earlier, she actually did the Stations of the Cross here. So people would come here to do the 14 Stations of the Cross. I would imagine that during Lent here, during Easter and times like that there'd be a lot of people here. And the same, I'd imagine, in November, at that particular stage.
And you're following a circular path again?
Yes, absolutely. And if you see what we're doing, we're actually going clockwise. The whole thing is... So we're following the sun. If you're to think about that, we're actually following the sun, the rotation of the sun. That's pagan. That's why it has been successful, and this is why people are doing this. And we're actually following the circuit that people have followed here for generations. Whether there were people that came here in the medieval period, like that soldier that came out here and witnessed the apparition, and the people that followed after that, the fact that story has survived. He was devout, and that was important to the people. The Dominicans took that and used it. They developed the pilgrimage here very obviously, and that's devotion to Our Lady. But people have been walking some of these circuits for 700 or 800 years. So I suppose when we walk back across the stream out this gate here, we're probably after completing our circuit. So I hope that in some way or other sort of covers maybe not all of the facts, but at least a sort of a journey, a pilgrimage of ideas around the Lady's Well here in Athenry and other wells. Having something like this here in the medieval period at Athenry or any site was very important, because pilgrimage draws pilgrims, and pilgrims eat, sleep, drink and do all the things. They were the tourists of their day, and that's what you did at that stage. When you did go a wandering, you went on pilgrimage. And of course, some of the kingly classes, if you like, the chieftains and that, their latter days were spent on pilgrimage, but it might be pilgrimage to a religious house. So it's very possible that old men who had committed terrible things in their lifetime, fighting in battles and murder, ended up in here with the Dominicans, probably being looked after, and their final years were being spent on a sort of pilgrimage, preparing them for the next life.
It's funny, just as we make our way out, I heard a car pass there, and that's the first sense of modern life really I felt since we came in the gate here.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And they do bring it back fairly sharp. That's actually can be impossible, even at these sites. And as quiet as they are, and as wonderful as they are, it's impossible to get away from modernity as well. But it's still here. It's an oasis. It's a wonderful place. And since we came in, a lady and her child come in as well. So there seems to be people moving around here all the time.
Well, it's been an absolute honour, and I have learned a huge amount about a site that's not very far away from me that I did not know anything about prior to this. Dr Christy Cunniffe, thanks very much.
And thanks to yourself. No, I'm delighted to have had the opportunity.